Hello. So I'm going to try my hand at um, doing a video with no notes. This is maybe a little bit trying, but I wanted to discuss Acts 10, other than looking at the Bible, but I mean no notes of a study. So I want to talk about Peter's vision because I've been watching some videos tonight about Peter's vision. And if anyone knows anything about the Torah observant movement, what their arguments are. But let me read it to you. So it's Acts 10, and we'll start at verse 9. Around noon the next day, while they were on their way, coming close to the town, Peter went up on the roof to pray. He became very hungry and wanted to eat. And while the food was being prepared, he fell into a trance, and saw heaven open, and something like a large linen sheet coming down, being lowered by its four corners to the ground. In it were all kinds of four-footed animals, reptiles, and birds of the air. Then a voice told him, "Get up, Peter, kill something and eat it." But Peter said, "Absolutely not, Lord, for I have never eaten anything that is common or unclean." Again the voice came to him a second time, "You must stop calling unclean what God has made clean." This happened 3 times. Then the sheet was quickly taken back into heaven. While Peter was at a loss to know what the vision he had seen could mean, the men sent by Cornelius asked for Simon's house and went to the gate. They called out and asked if Simon, who was called Peter, was staying there. Peter was still thinking about the vision when the Spirit told him, "Look, 3 men are looking for you. Get up, go downstairs, and don't hesitate to go with them, for I have sent them." So Peter went to the men and said, "I'm the man you're looking for. Why are you here?" The men replied, "Cornelius, a centurion and an upright and God-fearing man, who is respected by the whole Jewish nation, was instructed by a holy angel to send for you to come to his house to hear what you have to say." So Peter welcomed them as his guests. The next day he got up and went with them, and some of the brothers from Joppa went along with them. Verse 24, the next day they arrived in Caesarea. Cornelius was expecting them and had called his relatives and close friends together. When Peter was about to enter, Cornelius met him, bowed down at his feet, and began to worship him. But Peter made him get up and saying, "Stand up, I too am only a man." As Peter talked with them, he went in and found that many people had gathered. He told them, "You understand how wrong it is for a Jew to associate or visit with unbelievers. But God has shown me that I should stop calling anything common or unclean, and that is why I didn't hesitate when I was sent for. Now may I ask why you sent for me?" And then, of course, it continues. So people who are not Torah observant use this passage to say God made all animals clean. And the argument from the Torah observant movement is that here and then later, Peter makes it clear that the meaning of the dream is that don't make Gentiles unclean who I have said are clean. Okay, so I understand the point of their argument. However, number one, God still used all animals as a unit of clean to cause Peter to understand. But let's set aside that argument. We'll just set that aside. I think the Torah observant movement is good at pitching this argument, and this is our argument. And if we can sway you from looking anywhere else outside of that argument, we've won the argument. Yay for us. But the problem is, okay, hold up. God has said the Gentiles are clean. Okay? How are they clean? How are they clean? Because they're still pork eaters. At this point in time, they're still pork eaters. You know, they're not circumcised. They don't separate, when the women are menstruating. They're still eating pork products. They are doing what Gentiles do, but God says they're still clean. So what up with that? Well, I want to point out, and I've also heard the argument that, well, God never made it a law for Gentiles, for Jews to not be around Gentiles. Well, hold up, okay, because, Jews didn't pull that out of thin air. So I want to point out Leviticus 5:2. Leviticus 5:2 says, if anyone becomes, let me read it from a version that, I don't have their Torah observant, I don't have their Bible, but let's go with King James. Or if a soul touch any unclean thing, whether it be a carcass of an unclean beast, or a carcass of an unclean cattle, or the carcass of an unclean creeping thing, and if it be hidden from him, he also should be unclean and guilty. Okay, so there's that. So touching anything unclean, they will be guilty. But let's keep going. Leviticus 7:21. When anyone touches anything unclean, whether human uncleanness or an unclean animal or any unclean detestable thing, and eats of the flesh of the sacrifice of peace offerings which belong to the Lord, that person shall be cut off from his people. Then we have Leviticus 5:3. That was a continuation of the first verse I read. Or if he touches human uncleanness, of whatever sort his uncleanness may be, with which he becomes unclean, and it is hidden from him, then he comes to know it, he will be guilty. So, in other words, what we get from this is that, if a Jew ate pig, they were unclean. If they touched anything unclean, they were unclean. And they were guilty and had to be cut off from the people. Okay, so a Gentile is unclean if they eat pork, because it says in these verses, it says in the Torah law that anyone who eats pork products is unclean. Okay, that's the first thing. Trying to get this straight while doing this with no notes. That's the first thing. Anyone who eats something unclean is unclean. And then the law goes on to say, you need to be cut off from the people if you touch anything unclean. Okay, so if Gentiles are unclean from eating pork, then the Jews are not supposed to touch them. So the Jews did not pull that out of thin air. There was something to that. So let's go back to Acts 10. So if you want to go with the argument, and I see that it's there in the text that, it is ultimately talking about don't say that Gentiles are unclean. It's really God that said the Gentiles were unclean way back in the law, because anyone who ate pork was unclean, and you're not supposed to touch people or animals that are unclean. So if God is now in Acts 10 calling Gentiles clean now, how are they clean? They're still eating pork. So if you want to say that it's about Gentiles are clean now, then me, a Gentile, I am clean while I'm still eating pork. I think that for Torah observants to have this myopic type view of Acts 10 without looking at the broader context, I mean, granted to them, they have spoken of immediate context a little better than some people have, but the broader context is Gentiles are still unclean because they eat pork. So I think we have a couple of different meanings in this passage of Acts 10, and I think that we still have a very clear argument that Gentiles are clean whether they eat pork or not. And so that would be my point from this passage contextually, and like my videos, share my videos, comment below. I love this. We'll talk with you later. Bye-bye.